Well, hello. Of course, you're coming to you live from our studios in Auckland Park, Johannesburg. Welcome to the Week in Review. It is, of course, the program where we review some of the big stories to come out of the week ahead, what's been making headlines, and as always, getting South Africans talking. Now, I am Liesl Wilson, your host for today. We'll take a look at some of your headlines just before delving into your top stories. A former South African High Commissioner to the United Kingdom, Lindiwe Mabuza, will be laid to rest in Soweto today. South Africa has recorded 19,018 cases of coronavirus. A further 20 COVID-19 related deaths have been recorded. And Lewis Hamilton's quest to make Formula One history at the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix began brightly, with the Mercedes driver topping the timesheets after yesterday's practice. All right, so as we look at your headlines, your top story today, the adoption of South Africa's constitution signaled a clear break with the country's apartheid past and promising a future via human rights and dignity for all. Our anti-apartheid activist and former constitutional court Justice Albie Sachs says that despite a troubled past, South Africa has one of the most progressive constitutions in the world. He was speaking at a webinar hosted by the Justice Department to mark the 25th anniversary of former President Nelson Mandela's signing of the country's constitution into law. Justice Sachs says South Africans should be proud of their constitution.
The signing into law of the South African Constitution in 1996 reconfigured the nation from one marred by colonialism and suppression to one which strives for non-racialism and diversity. Former Constitutional Justice Albie Sachs says from the onset, the Constitution was set out to be a catalyst for the achievement of equality.
Very early on, we decided we look at the impact of the laws. We look at systematic forms of exclusion and marginalization. We look not only at the intent of the laws and the practices, but the way they affect people in real life. And we try to secure fundamental respect for the dignity of everybody in a very diverse society.
While many agree that this country has the most progressive constitution in the world, there's also general consensus that South Africa is one of the most unequal countries in the world.
It's important to highlight that many, if not most, of the advances we've made in our country are because of the constitutionally guaranteed human rights. Active citizenry has also been important in ensuring access to those rights. The problem is that, as we all know, we are one of the most inequitable countries in the world as far as between the haves and the have-nots.
On the other hand, members of the LGBTQI+ community believe that there's so much that needs to be done, especially in preventing hate crimes in this community.
Queer communities are targeted and exposed to gender-based to dangers based on gender identity and sexual orientation. It is for this reason that the 25th anniversary of the signing of the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa becomes an important moment to take stock, reflect, assess, and review various intervention in judicial and constitutional means to migrate as well as to live expectations promised by the Constitution itself.
The struggle for rights of LGBTI people is a core part of the human rights struggle, as the panelists have indicated. And yet in many parts, here in South Africa and also in the world, members of the LGBTI people continue to be targets of brutal attacks, brutal murders, and discrimination and victimization.
The CEO of the Nelson Mandela Foundation, Sello Hatang, says leaders need to do better to ensure a better life for South Africans.
We must commit ourselves to say we want to do differently. We want to ensure that those who gave us the power to bring about change in the lives of many, that we do bring about that power. And that everything that we do is part of an ecosystem that ensures that we become a healed nation.
The 25th anniversary of the signing of the Constitution coincides with International Human Rights Day. Yolisa Njamela for SABC News in Johannesburg.
All right, so for more on this, let us bring in our SABC specialist researcher, Emil Omra. Emil, very good afternoon. Thank you for joining us here today.
Good afternoon, Lisa.
I mean, obviously, you've been involved extensively in the research surrounding this subject matter. And whilst there are many experts to echo, sentiments both for and against in terms of the progression, I wonder if we can pick your brain today and some of the more historical elements related to your research. I mean, as we know, the Constitution has already been amended 17 times since it came into effect back in 1996. I mean, for those who are not privy to that information, I mean, what's the role of the Constitution to date? Walk us through what those changes entailed over the years.
Well, you see, the South African Constitution sort of provides for its own amendment by Parliament and prescribes sort of special procedures to effect it. So, as you say, the Constitution has already been amended 17 times since it came into force in 1996. The first amendment of that was in August 1997. Now, this was to make further provision in relation to the oath of office sworn in by the president or the acting president at the time. And this was also to extend the cutoff date in respect of granting amnesty. Our second amendment then was in October a year later in 1998. And this was sort of to extend the term of municipal councils and to provide for sort of designated alternates in terms of the Judicial Service Commission. We also had a few name changes that were applicable then, changing the name of the Human Rights Commission and adjusting the powers of the Public Service Commission at the time. So over a lot of those changes then, there were sort of a lot of procedural changes over the years. And then in sort of 2003 then, we saw the Bill of Rights. Another big change was for the Bill of Rights, regulating certain sort of financial matters to be dealt with in terms of Section 76 of the Constitution. We also saw then that we changed the name of the Northern Province in 2003, in April 2003, to Limpopo. That's also quite a substantial change in the history of our country. It was also to sort of regulate provincial intervention in sort of local government. And sort of moving on to our more recent changes, in March 2009, the Constitution was amended to redetermine the geographical areas of the provinces of Gauteng and the Northwest. And lastly, in February 2013, the Constitution was amended again to further define the role of the Chief Justice as the head of the judiciary, and to provide for a single High Court of South Africa, and to provide that the Constitutional Court is the highest court in all matters. So some big changes to our judicial system in 2013, which was the last time we amended the Constitution.
Well, speaking of those significant changes, I mean, I want to, in fact, hone in on the Constitutional Court to date. I mean, according to your research, what's been the role of the Constitutional Court in upholding the Constitution, and has it successfully executed and delivered on the mandates of the Constitution to date?
Well, if we look at the Constitutional Court itself, it's South Africa's sort of highest court on constitutional matters. So its jurisdiction, or the scope of its authority to hear cases, is restricted to constitutional matters and issues connected with decisions on constitutional matters. So this is what sort of defines the court from others. A lot of matters get taken through and say, why can't the Constitution deal with this? Criminal and legal matters are its own matter, but when it comes to matters specifically of the Constitution, that's when the Constitutional Court comes in. It is the highest court, as I say, in all constitutional matters, and may decide, and therefore it may only decide on constitutional matters and issues connected with decisions thereof. So yes, it has, I think, from my personal opinion, it has sort of been highly effective in carrying that out. South Africa is, in our history of state capture and a lot of our sort of public institutions being broken down, we still see global throughout the world and here that our constitutional court and our courts and our justice system itself is sort of still praised for being unbiased and for delivering judgments within the law. So the Constitution, and as we'll get on, the Constitutional Court has issued judgments which have impacted society in a large manner.
Absolutely, and I wonder if you'd like to reflect on some of those key cases to date. I mean, this next question is a twofold question imparting. What are some of those key cases that have affected our society and our constitutional rights? In the same breath, what are the cases with political implications? How has that been tested to date?
I think one of the big ones, if we look back to 1998, when the National Coalition for Gay and Lesbian Equality took on the Minister of Justice at the time, and basically South Africa's constitution at the time was the first in the world to sort of prohibit unfair discrimination on the grounds of sexual orientation. But however, there was still apartheid era laws in place which prohibited sodomy between two consenting adult men, and which stated that public displays of affection was sort of indecent. So that was a landmark case for South Africa, and especially for our LGBTIQ plus rights, because the Constitutional Court found that the offence of sodomy and its inclusion as a crime in the Sexual Offences Act violated the rights of gay men to equality and dignity and privacy. So it found that this law was sort of unconstitutional and invalid. So that was one of the landmark cases. And then if we look back at sort of the Constitutional Court's first case, that was between it was the state versus Makwanyana, if I'm not mistaken. It was back in 1995, and this case sort of the court faced the question as to whether the death penalty is still compatible within the right to life clause in the Constitution. So obviously, the death penalty was still a thing before the Constitutional Court was invoked, and it would still have been a thing if the Constitutional Court delivered their judgment in any other way. But basically, in a unanimous judgment at the time, the court ruled that the death penalty was unconstitutional, and the court forbade the government from executing death row prisoners and ruled that these prisoners should remain in prison until new sentences were imposed. So those were two landmark cases. Obviously, there have been a lot more, but obviously because of time, we can't really get into them. And talking about the sort of political cases, if we just speak very recently about something that will still be fresh in our viewers' memories. Back in 2017, when former President Jacob Zuma dismissed Pravin Gordhan, who was finance minister at the time, and his deputy, SABC Jonas, political parties such as the UDM, the DA, and the EFF, they moved to schedule a motion of no confidence against Zuma at the time, but the National Assembly Speaker, Baleka Mbete, basically said actually she didn't have the powers to determine if the vote could be held in secret ballots. And then in a landmark ruling, the Constitutional Court basically said that the Speaker of the National Assembly had the constitutional powers to prescribe that voting in a motion of no confidence could be held by secret ballot. Even though the motion didn't succeed, it did serve as a landmark ruling for how we conduct ourselves in Parliament since then.
Emil, I want to thank you very much for your time today. Thank you very much for contextualizing, giving us some of the historical elements related to the signing of the Constitution in South Africa. Obviously, the Constitutional Court has been amended 17 times, coming to effect back in 1996. Again, SABC specialist researcher Emil Amro, again, chatting to us and outlining some of the historical significances after that signing into law 25 years ago of the Constitution. Again, former President Nelson Mandela signing it in Sharpeville on the 10th of December 1996. Well, we'll leave that conversation there. Let's take a quick ad break. We continue with more news and updates on the other side. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back. You are watching The Week in Review with myself, Liesl Wilson. More news at this hour. The Public Service Commission says it will introduce lifestyle audits for government workers from February of 2022. It means that lifestyles of public servants, including MECs, premiers, ministers, and those at state-owned enterprise, will be looked into to see if they match their salaries. Now, the group says that the audits would draw from a variety of databases that would provide management and also investigators with a snapshot into certain aspects of the life of an employee. But for more on this, we are now joined by Dr. Solomon Wogenrath Vermaak, who is the Chief Director of Public Administration Ethics, Integrity and Disciplinary Technical Assistance Unit, which is at the Department of Public Service and Administration. Oh, Dr. Solomon, a very good afternoon. Thanks for joining us here today.
Good afternoon, Liesl, and good afternoon, viewers.
Well, let's jump straight into it. How important is it for government to implement these lifestyle audits at this point?
Well, it's of great importance. Remember, the issue of lifestyle audits started a few years ago already when President Ramaphosa announced this during the first State of the Nation address. Government thereafter adopted under the 2019-2020 medium-term strategic framework a priority one, a capable, ethical and developmental state to which this lifestyle audits is responding to. So the DPSA adopted this lifestyle audits as part of government's program to professionalize the public service and to look at renewal and a focus on ethics for public servants. And it's also for this reason that this unit was established, so that we can focus on specifically issues of ethics and corruption.
All right, so speaking of ethics and corruption, I think specifically then, why are lifestyle audits necessary for those within the public service? What has been unearthed to date?
We did not adopt lifestyle audits in the public service because there's a crisis with corrupt public service employees. But if you want to professionalize the public service, you need transparency. And lifestyle audits provide for this. But also lifestyle audits remind the public service employees that their behavior is subject to scrutiny, as the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa requires. And it requires, in terms of Section 195, a high standard of professional ethics to be promoted and maintained. So lifestyle audits allows for the prevention and detection of fraud and corruption, and it also acts as a deterrent against unethical and criminal behavior. So that is what we need for those few bad apples in the public service.
Absolutely. And I think when you're looking at the objectives and perhaps what it seeks to uncover, I mean, what do these lifestyle audits then seek to uncover overall?
A lifestyle audit, there's a lot of definitions around lifestyle audit, but the easiest definition is to say it's tests that you apply to detect unexplained wealth amongst your employees. So, because it's a known fact that people spend what they steal. So what a lifestyle audit seek to uncover is those employees who has unexplained wealth that they cannot actually account for. So that is what you want to uncover with any lifestyle audit. And it's also a risk management tool that a department then can use if you have a full picture on your employees' lifestyle to determine what risks do you need to mitigate and what strategies do you need to employ to address corruption and also unethical conduct.
Well, will these audits become mandatory for those in public service come February 2022?
It's actually already compulsory for all public servants. It started as being compulsory from the 1st of April 2021.
Okay.
That is when the Minister for the Public Service and Administration drafted and approved a guide on the implementation of lifestyle audits. So this has become compulsory already, and that is for public service employees. And by definition, public service employees are those employed in the national and the provincial departments. But we are looking at extending that through legislation to the local government level so that we can actually then address it in the public administration. And we've already drafted some legislation, the regulations under the Public Administration Management Act, And we need concurrence of SALGA and COCTA on this, and we're already engaged. We are far in terms of our engagements, and as soon as it's approved, then it will also be extended to the local government sphere. That actually includes the local government, and then will be compulsory for the whole of the public administration.
So Dr. Solomon, I mean, what will these recommended practices look like? I wonder also in terms of repercussions. I mean, what are the repercussions, let's say, for individuals who refuse to undergo a lifestyle audit as well? Or how do we determine those?
If you see, as I've explained, lifestyle audits is one of the tools to be used by a department to prevent, deter acts of corruption. So the use of that was explained in that guide that I referred to, that the DPSA issued to departments. So the implementation is guided by Regulation 22 of the Public Service Regulations, which expects of a head of a department to have ethics management strategies in place to analyze the risks and to mitigate this risk. So it would be a lawful instruction to the employees to undergo a lifestyle audit. And if a person refuses a lawful instruction, then the person will face disciplinary action for contravening the code of conduct.
All right. Thank you so much for your time today, for contextualizing and unpacking that again. Dr. Solomon Wuchenraad from Mark explaining why the Public Service Commission says it will be introducing some lifestyle audits for government workers as of February 2022. And it means that lifestyles of public servants, which includes MECs and premiers, ministers, and those who are at state-owned enterprises, all of them will be looked into to see if they match their salaries. The group says that the audits would draw from a variety of databases, providing management and also investigators with a snapshot into certain aspects of the life of an employee, perhaps to mitigate corruption and also promote transparency within the public service. Again, thank you very much to Dr. Solomon Wuchenraad from Mark for his time. He's the Chief Director of Public Administration, Ethics, Integrity and Disciplinary Technical Assistance Unit, which obviously is at the Department of Public Service and Administration at large. Let's take a quick ad break. We continue on the other side. The week in review. Let's continue with more news. Now, former ANC President Thabo Mbeki has described the late former High Commissioner to the United Kingdom, Lindiwe Mabuza, as a person who had an outstanding capacity to organize people in the party. Mbeki was speaking at Mabuza's funeral service in Soweto, Johannesburg, where President Cyril Ramaphosa has accorded Mabuza a special provincial funeral. Mabuza held a number of diplomatic positions in various countries. Mbeki says Mabuza was also committed to feminism.
At some point, she edited a magazine of the ANC Women's section. What was it? Then the ANC section in exile, The Voice of Women. And added quality and content to that very important journal, VOW, The Voice of Women. She had an outstanding organizing capacity. Wherever she has served, in all of these places that Barbara has mentioned, whether in the Sweden and Scandinavia, or in the US, or Germany, or Malaysia, and then everywhere else, always managed to organize people behind the struggle behind the African National Congress. And I think it's because people instinctively believed her. They believed in this beautiful future for South Africa that she talked about, and were prepared to go along with her. I'm saying, had she lived the process of renewal, following this prescript of better few about better, would have left Lindiwe as one of its members.
Meanwhile, in other news, the festive season is often known as a time for family gatherings and amazing feasts. But with rising unemployment figures and many families having lost their breadwinners due to the COVID-19 pandemic, more households are without food on the table this festive season. Unemployment rates by Stats SA indicates that the Northern Cape currently now stands at 24.9%, with expanded unemployment nearing 50%. Non-profit organizations in the provinces say they are also seeing more and more destitute children in need of help.
This household is one of many in Longlands near Kimberley, where unemployed parents are battling to take care of their children. Zelda Hobbit says without a source of income, putting bread on the table for her child and that of her late sister's children has become an uphill battle.
I don't have an income. I'm not getting any job in Longlands, and that's a problem. When we are short of money, then I have to go borrow money for electricity and food. I have to use my own children's grant money to buy food.
Many, like Roberts, say they wish NGOs helping with children could be granted more support to help people battling to make end meet.
Sometimes, when I need to buy school supplies, they help me with that. When there's no food, they are able to help me out with vouchers.
Longlands Home Community-Based Care says since COVID-19 hit the country, more households lost income and the number of children they assist has skyrocketed. The organization says it is, however, also stranded for financial support.
We used to see 78 children, but now with this COVID, it increased, the numbers increased to 101 children. What we want to see is financial assistance from different departments, because it's really, it's so painful to see that children really need. The children in need, and we are helpless, we can't help them.
The Department of Social Development in the province says they are providing different types of programs to help the unemployed and vulnerable members of society.
Also introduced the Social Relief Grant, commonly known as the 350 grant, and these are all administered by SASA. Now, during December time, we experienced an increase in the services required by the department, and holistically throughout the year we provide services for various target groups, and some of the services that we render, and more so that we double up during the holiday periods, are programs specifically designed for school-going children and young people.
With the festive season upon us, many say they are worried they will not be able to provide for their families. Katlehom Rapela, SABC News, Longlands in the Northern Cape.
All right, we'll take another quick ad break. We continue on the other side. Right, welcome back. Let's take a look at some finance news now. Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana says that government plans to introduce competition in energy generation, ports and rail as part of economic structural reforms. Godongwana addressed the National Assembly virtually about adopting the medium-term budget policy statement and the Adjustment Appropriations Bill. Now, the bill was passed by 206 votes to 117.
The Finance Minister has reacted to criticism that the structural reforms are dragging. He says government is redoubling its efforts to reconstruct and stimulate the economy. Godongwana says part of the plans is to introduce competition to energy generation as well as other sectors.
Important structural reform. We begin to introduce reforms in the port by introducing competition in port operations. We're beginning to introduce reforms in the rail by bringing in the third-party operators and competition into the rail sector.
The Finance Minister has also insisted that the Auditor General's audit outcomes for departments and state-owned companies show huge improvements.
Those audit outcomes say, in fact, there's a huge improvement in managing our books. And that improvement means we've got 75% unqualified reports, or 71% unqualified reports. The distinction is two.
Meanwhile, there has been condemnation of the international travel ban against South Africa following the discovery of the Omicron virus.
The blaming of South Africa for superior science defies logic and smack of racism, prejudice, neocolonialism, and complete lack of understanding of basic science from people who are supposed to know better.
I will be failing in my duty, Deputy Speaker, if I do not condemn in the strongest terms the racism which Europe, USA, and the UK are showing against South Africa and Southern Africa, punishing us for superior science in discovering Omicron variant. The President argues that the banning of flights to and from our country is devoid of any science. It is unnecessary racist hysteria of the so-called developed countries.
Reeling tourism and hospitality industries have been further battered by a totally unfair international travel ban. This is travel apartheid indeed.
Opposition parties have opposed the mini-budget tabled last month.
Speaker. South Africa cannot afford to keep going down this path of a debt-based fiscal policy. The policy has only succeeded in saddling the country with a high interest rate on debt repayments, slow economic growth, and fewer resources to spend on growth drivers.
There was a clear commitment to establishment a state-owned bank. We are still waiting. We were told that we will soon see the establishment of Sovereign Wealth Fund. We are still waiting. We still do not have a dependable electricity supply. Instead, we are still subjected to electricity blackouts while the President dreams of electric cars, bullet trains, and smart cities.
On behalf of the people of South Africa, we again plead for an urgent review of the fuel price structure, something that has been on the table, I believe, from 2019.
This is a failed government. This is a broken government. This is a government that has failed the people, that has looted and that has only lined their own pockets, who's only interested in the luxuries of their ministers.
If you read the quarterly report, you will have seen that in the first quarter, there was a net outflow of capital in South Africa of 64 billion South African rands. In the second quarter, that increased to 109 billion rands. What does that tell you? It tells you that not only in terms of portfolio investment, people are finding other investment opportunities elsewhere.
The sitting did not go without incident on the last day of Parliament as UDM MP Ngabayomzi Kwankwa was ejected for using his trademark remark, Lamasela, or these thieves, at the end of his speech. After initially refusing to leave, he eventually packed his things and left. He says he will be writing to the Rules Committee to contest the decision. Ulelani Philip, SABC News, Parliament.
Yes, Honourable Member.
Our residents of informal settlements at Oudtshoorn and the Little Karoo are struggling to rebuild their lives. It follows heavy flooding in the area earlier this week. The severe weather damaged roads, uprooted trees and destroyed many houses and shacks. Gift of the Givers was in the region to provide them with food, blankets and other necessities.
Nearly a week after the disaster hit them, Oudtshoorn residents are still trying to pick up the pieces of their lives. Around 10,000 homes across the town have been affected. Mopping up operations are still in progress, but it comes with its own challenges.
The water came up until here. My children had to escape through a window when the water came gushing into the house. Everything in the house is still soaking wet. I'm tired of all this now because it's always wet, and when I try to dry it, then it gets wet again.
Gift of the Givers handed over much needed items to the needy community.
We are out here and we're bringing food hampers, mattresses, blankets that are currently much needed. Also knowing that the people are suffering under this COVID pandemic, and on top of that they had a flood disaster. So today we are here together with the municipality to just come and bring relief to the people of Oudtshoorn.
For the last month we've had 2 incidents of inclement weather. First one wasn't so bad, second one was a bit severe. 10,000 of households were basically affected. That's more than a third of the households that we have in Oudtshoorn. We've been assisting them from our side, but of course An organization like Gift of the Givers and others have come to the fore and have assisted us with assisting our communities.
The good news for the water-scarce town is that the local dam is 100% full and overflowing. Segwi Chetty, SABC News, Oudtshoorn in the Little Karoo.
Right now, former President Thabo Mbeki says that the African Union Peace and Security Councils failed to act on time within the Ethiopian conflict. He was delivering the Albert Luthuli lecture to honor the late anti-apartheid activist. Mbeki says the council has a critical mandate to ensure that there's peace and stability on the continent, where many people have been displaced since the war started in the northern parts of Ethiopia.
Former President Thabo Mbeki says it's extremely worrisome that there is a new conflict in Africa. He says the situation is terrible in the northern part of Ethiopia since the war broke out. But Mbeki has lashed out the African Union Peace and Security Council for failing to act timelessly.
The African Union Peace and Security Council had not addressed it. This is despite its express mandate to intervene to ensure peace and stability in all the member states of the AU, as well as the fact that Ethiopia hosts the headquarters of the African Union.
The former president also did not hold back and lambasted the developed nations under G8, which is now known as G7, for abandoning Africa's developmental blueprint.
In 2002, the developed countries organized in the G8 adopted their G8 Africa Action Plan, in which they undertook to align their economic relations with our continent on the basis of Africa's own program, NEPAD. This was a major step forward towards constructing equitable relations between our continent and the developed countries, with some of them being our former colonizers.
Meanwhile, Mbeki didn't have kind words for NATO since it invaded Libya in 2011.
The UN Security Council effectively authorized NATO to commit an act of aggression to achieve regime change in Libya by removing the head of state, Colonel Gaddafi.
The former president has lamented the fact that South Africa has lost its prestige in the continent as the governing party, the ANC, is caught up in internal battles. Khalihle Khumalo, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Moving on to other news, where the ANC in the Matsikama municipality says it alone cannot be painted as a corrupt party. It says the Democratic Alliance, which now runs the municipality, also has allegations of suspected breaches of legislation leveled against it. Now, the party says it will continue with investigations into these allegations, which range from nepotism to supply chain management violations, amongst other issues. But the DA in the region has questioned the timing of these allegations.
Former Matsikama Deputy Mayor, the ANC's Cecil Lafleur, appointed a legal and forensic firm to conduct the investigation.
After the ANC took over from the DA, there was a lot of accusations as to how corrupt the ANC municipality or government, not the government, the ANC council was. We then just try to give the public a different opinion as from the opinion that they got from the DA.
The possible violations relate to supply chain management and recruitment policies. In the report, the investigators disclaim that they have not verified the authenticity or validity of records made available to them, and the views expressed are not a pronouncement of guilt or innocence. But the party says it will push ahead. These allegations date back to the period between 2016 to 2019 when the DA led the municipality. From 2019 to the recent local government elections, the ANC was in power here. The DA says the ANC should have investigated when it ran the municipality and then acted on those findings.
It's strange to me that they are raising this now, and they didn't give it any attention and investigate or take a council decision when they were in power. So yes, the timing is suspicious to me, as though there are other motives.
Matsikama is currently also being investigated by the SIU for alleged PPE corruption. It is also one of the municipalities which fell behind with its payment to Eskom to the tune of millions of rands. Abra Barbia, SABC News, Vredendal, Matsikama.
Well, some gender-based violence victims say the government is not doing enough to support and protect them. They've expressed this during an event to mark the end of 16 days of activism against women and children abuse at the Tlokweng village in the Moses Kotane local municipality near Rustenburg. The village has been flagged as one of the GBV hotspots in the province.
19-year-old Themba Mogonediwa is one of the many victims of gender-based violence at Tlokweng village. He's also a member of the LGBTQI+ community. He says he was out partying with friends and drinking. He says he blacked out, during which he was raped.
And after drinking, I smoked happily. Then I realized that happily is not enough for my body. I vomited, and after that, I don't know what's happened. I woke up at the background of saloon.
Themba says lack of awareness campaigns by government makes such crimes against LGBTQI+ members to be treated lightly by the police. He says victims need to know the do's and don'ts after being physically abused.
At the clinic and the hospital, they must tell the people after being abused, they must not bath or go to the toilet, because those things are having a more proof on the case.
The provincial government has acknowledged the shortcomings in their effort to fight gender-based violence.
We need this constant visit by the officials to the victim. They also complained that the police station is too far. We are going to have to look at this.
According to the Department of Social Development, out of the 77 cases of gender-based violence reported in the Bojanala District Municipality, 46 are from Tlokweng village. The department says they have put measures in place to curb the scourge.
We embarked on door-to-door campaign because we went to Ramutsiringwilwa, where we were able to knock at the doors of our communities to say to them, if there's a problem like this next door, you need to call the police. You need to report the case.
The government also says the fight against gender-based violence must be an all-year-round activity and not only during the 16 days of activism. Kea Dimilo Malusi, SABC News, Tlokweng Village.
Right, let's take another ad break. On the other side, we'll explore the latest figures around. Right, welcome back. Let's continue with more news. Now, South Africa's recorded 19,018 cases of coronavirus, a further 20 COVID-19 related fatalities. It represents a positivity rate of 22.8%. Now, the COVID-19 related death figure has increased to 90,080 people, where active cases have increased to over 143,000, with our recovery rate at 92.5%. Meanwhile, vaccines administered have increased to that of over 27 million doses to date. While staying in health news, Health Minister Dr. Joe Phaahla says that the National Coronavirus Command Council is expected to meet next week to re-evaluate the country's lockdown restrictions as cases continue to escalate. Phaahla says that weekly COVID-19 infections in Gauteng went up by 400% in the first week of December.
The NCCC will meet in the coming week and decisions will be made in terms of how we respond based on recommendations, of course, from us also, as I've said, from the various committees which we consult with ministerial advisory committees and various experts, including what we are discussing here. We'll summarize that into a recommendation to the NCCC. What we'll be doing in the next few weeks, the scientists will continue, as they've done in the past, to conduct quality research to understand this variant and share the information as quickly as possible. Our scientific advisors continue to provide our government guidance on what kind of restrictions we need to, if we have to impose further restrictions, the expansion of vaccination, and also introduction of new treatments.
Also on health news, the Mpumalanga Health Department says it's all systems go for the approaching festive season. The MEC of Health in the province has launched the festive season plan. The department also received a donation of a fully equipped ambulance. It's worth 1.2 million rand in an effort to assist emergency services on the roads. Emergency services are ready to hit the road running for the festive season, as road accidents, substance abuse and gender-based violence are just some of the reasons for an influx of patients in hospitals. Our health authorities have also raised concerns about the high number of COVID-19 cases. Well, that's all we have for you today. Once again, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for joining us here on the Week in Review. Until tomorrow for a look at the week ahead, from myself, Liesl Wilson, and the team, it is goodbye for now.